So Angeline, what causes thyroid nodules and how to shrink them? I think I brought that up. A lot of your thyroid nodules, remember, thyroid nodules are caused when your thyroid gland, when the cells in your thyroid gland become over enlarged because they're trying to produce thyroid hormone, but they can't, or when you're eating things that can contribute to goiter formation, like those goitrogenic foods. So the way that you shrink them is you figure that out, right? Goitrogenic foods are easy, but the rest of this right here is how you figure it out. Okay, let's see here. So normal TSH, normal T4, but low T3. You could have a selenium problem, you could have a zinc problem, you could have an iron problem, you could have a manganese problem. Those minerals are all important for the conversion of T4 to T3. Is there a connection between thyroid dysfunction and type 2 diabetes? You know, I don't know that anybody's really researched those two in conjunction with one another, but a lot of the triggers for type 2 diabetes are similar with as far as triggers for thyroid dysfunction. But, you know, if you're asking for a direct connection, does type 2 diabetes cause thyroid dysfunction or vice versa? I would say that thyroid dysfunction definitely, we know, increases the risk for the development of metabolic syndrome, thus leading to type 2 diabetes, but not so much type 2 diabetes necessarily being researched as a cause or causation of low thyroid. But again, low thyroid, remember, what is that? It slows down your metabolism. When your metabolism is dysfunctional, then you can't generate energy efficiently. And when you can't generate energy efficiently, your body does what with that energy? It stores it. How does it store it? A lot of times it'll store it as visceral fat. That visceral fat makes you makes you less sensitive to insulin. We want that increased metabolism, makes you less sensitive to insulin. And so when you're less sensitive to insulin, then what happens? Your body produces more insulin. And over time, what happens is you become less and less, you become more and more insulin resistant. And then that leads to the development of type 2 diabetes, adult onset diabetes. So Caroline asking about our products being nut-free. Yeah, for the most part, they are. The only product that I can think of off the top of my head, Caroline, that we carry that is not nut-free. It's peanut-free, and it's produced in a peanut-free facility. But it has an almond flour in it. It's our Warrior Bread. Our Warrior Bread product, it has an almond flour as part of its base flour. So, but the other products, my general vitamins, minerals, etc., are nut-free. Let's see, is the iodine RDA too low at 150 micrograms? Yes, definitely. So understand that the old RDAs, these old numbers that when you look at a food wrapper, food package, or you read it even in a textbook, it says RDA stands for recommended daily allowance. These numbers were not based on optimal levels of nutrients. They were based on the quantity of iodine it took to take somebody with severe hypothyroidism goiter to not have severe disease. So it's not about an optimal level as much as it is about a level that, as a bare minimum, this person can function without major illness or disease. But it's not necessarily the optimal ingestion, or rather the optimal recommendation, especially with our environments today. Chlorine is something we didn't talk about, but chlorine is also a halide. And of course, your water's chlorinated, your water's also brominated, and your water's also fluorinated. So the three halides are being added to your drinking water. And if you're not filtering your drinking water with reverse osmosis specifically, then you're not getting all the halide out of your water. If you're using a carbon pitcher filter, if you're using one of these the popular brand starts with a B that claims to take the fluoride out, I can't tell you how many hundreds of times we've seen fluoride toxicity and people in my office that are using those filters because they're not as effective at getting fluoride out as reverse osmosis. So RO, in my opinion, if you live in the city, if your water's treated, you need RO. If you're on a well, it's a different story. But if you're in the city, you need RO filtration if you want to protect yourself. Can athlete's foot and premature white hair be a symptom of hypothyroidism? No, athlete's foot is fungus. So, again, that can be co-present. So you can have athlete's foot as a fungal infection, and, that can contribute to, it's really, if you get athlete's foot, it's a sign that your immune system's not properly functioning. As far as premature hair turning white, that typically low protein, low B12, low B5, low zinc, those are all nutrients, low manganese can all cause premature graying or whiteness changes in the hair. Let's see here. So Mimi's asking, Doc, will you post the studies so that we can take them to our doctors to help educate them? Yes, that's what I was talking about, Mimi. Those studies, all that research is on, you can go to glutenfreesociety.org and we have full-blown article linking to all the medical references, all of the studies that I was talking about tonight, but also even additional studies beyond those ones I talked about in tonight's presentation. So yeah, feel free to use Gluten-Free Society as your resource and share it with your friends who also struggle or may have a problem with thyroid, so that, again, the more people we can send to doctors with more power, empowerment, and information, the more lives we're going to be able to change. Let's see, scroll down that left for me. How much tyrosine is safe to take if we don't eat heavy protein? You can take 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of tyrosine a day. It's safe. I mean, I've never seen anybody have a side effect from tyrosine per se, but you do have to also remember that, anything in any amount for people can become toxic. So again, I might start with that, but I would also encourage you to get with your doctor to measure your tyrosine levels as well. How would you suggest somebody with Hashimoto's already on an organic, gluten-free, soy-free diet help correct a chronic zinc deficiency and free copper excess after multiple years of eating high zinc-containing foods and supplementing with zinc? So, that question is so deep. Go back up just a little bit. So you asked me an hour-long consult question, Carrie Ann. I would first even challenge what you surmise might be the case. So like what you're suggesting about yourself, which is you have free copper excess because of chronic zinc supplementation. And I would argue that may not even be the case, depending on how you found that information. I mean, the biochemistry between zinc and copper and iron is very detailed. And so a lot of people don't understand it well enough to be able to make that type of conclusion, or the testing that you had done may not be able to make that type of conclusion. So I would even challenge the premise of what you're saying. And again, your question, I wish I could be more helpful, but you need to really, the best way to get an answer to that is a consultation, because it's just too in-depth. Is it safe to take Armour Thyroid? Yeah, it's safe to take Armour Thyroid. It's an FDA-approved medication. The question isn't whether or not it's safe. It is safe, okay, if it doesn't contain ingredients that you react to, and if you absolutely need it. But I would say, how do you know if you need it if you haven't investigated all the things that we're really talking about? So that's where you get with a good doc who's willing to go through and investigate those things first, and then if you still need it after you've done all of this and you still find that you need some medication to support your thyroid, you've done all of what we know. Remember, what I'm sharing with you is what we don't know. And there's always this in science, there's always the fundamental premise of we don't know what we don't know. And we may find out in the next 5 years, the next 6 years, that there are key elements that I taught you tonight that are big gaping holes in what we currently know that may change and transform the lives of people with a thyroid problem. And that's where medicine can be helpful. So I'm not anti-medicine, I'm just anti-medicine without proper investigation and without intelligent research. So Mary's asking why her skin itches when the food moves to her large intestine just before a bowel movement. I would say you have leaky gut. I would say that's why, and that your poop and other toxins from your poop are leaking into your bloodstream, and they're creating a potentially histaminic-like response, which is causing your skin to itch. That would be just a throw out there guess for you. What does it mean if your TSH is less than 0? So Sherry, more specific, if your TSH is less than 0, again, less than 0 means it's too low. It needs to be at least at 0.5. That's kind of the bottom of the barrel for TSH. And if it's lower than that, you either have hyperthyroid, or your medicine that you're taking for your thyroid is potentially too strong. If you're taking thyroid medicine and your TSH is less than 0, get with your doctor. Have that conversation with your doctor about your dosing. Difference between free T3 versus total T3 is the total T3 and T4 are the quantities of T4 and T3 that are bound to protein in your bloodstream, combined with the free T3 and T4, whereas the free T3, T4 is just the free-floating hormone itself. The free-floating hormone is what has the metabolic function and action. So you should get them both measured, both free and total T3 and T4, but it's that free T3, T4 that it's very critical to look at that with a discerning eye. So what's the role of reverse T3? I like that question. Reverse T3 is the braking system of your thyroid. So if you have too much T4, so if your T4 is too high, your body is going to make more reverse T3. It's going to make also regular T3. Okay, but it's going to take some of that excessive T4 and it's going to convert it. Where you'll see a lot of times people will have high reverse T3 is if they're being over-medicated. It's a very common scenario. And if you're being over-medicated, so some doctors look at reverse T3 and they don't consider the fact that you might be being over-medicated. They just consider that you might be iron or selenium deficient. And so then they put you on selenium because your reverse T3 is too high. But it's always important to discern that reverse T3 is a braking system. So it's designed to take off some of the excessive T4 overproduction, and that's if you're being over-medicated or if your body doesn't need quite as much. But it will also be produced if this is being blocked by a selenium deficiency. Actually, not just selenium, but selenium, iron, zinc is necessary for that, manganese is necessary for that. There's several minerals involved in that, but selenium is the primary one in that. So that's why T3, reverse T3 and T3 are so important. Fluoride doesn't block T3 receptors. Fluoride competes with iodine uptake into the thyroid gland. So fluoride displaces iodine's ability to get into your thyroid gland to be able to make T4 and T3. That's what halides do. They displace iodine. Let's see here. Can you still have dysbiosis if your micronutrient test comes back with no deficiencies? Absolutely, you can, Tracy. That's definitely something that can happen. Dysbiosis can be present even in the absence of micronutrient deficiencies. Oh, go back up. I want to see that on. So yeah, raw vegan for 4.5 years prior to Hashimoto's. Wow, nodules on both sides of my thyroid. Yeah, Lacey, I'm glad you're watching tonight, because that's, hopefully you took that away from this show, and that you understand that being raw vegan is, cooking those vegetables can be very critical if you've got goiter or if you've got nodules. But also protein, you may want to look at your protein levels, because you may not be getting enough being in a raw vegan type of diet. Okay, let's keep going down on the left. Let's also go down on, oh, here we go. So I said first come, first serve with the questions, but some of these questions are monster questions. Like, again, it would take me an hour consult just to even scratch the surface and getting into it. So if I don't grab your question, it's not that I'm trying to ignore you. It's that it's just too complex for the show. We got to keep it, the keep it simple principle. We got to ask KISS type questions. What does it mean if free T3 is flagged as low? it basically means that you're not producing adequate quantities of it. And that's, again, go back and think about what I talked about tonight, which is why aren't you producing enough T3? If your T4 is normal, it could be a conversion issue. If your T3, if your T4 is also low, it could just be an iodine issue. I mean, there's a number of different potential possibilities that could be, but it's hard to say from just the one number. Let's see. Does fat toxicity impair thyroid function? Define fat toxicity. You mean being overweight or obese, or do you mean storing toxic compounds in your fat tissue? I'm not sure what you mean by that question, because fat is a storage organ that stores a lot of toxic compounds. So the more toxic exposure you've had over time, fat can definitely, weight loss can mobilize toxins out of your fat and create problems. This is why some people, when they're going initially and they lose a lot of weight, they can feel worse before they feel better. We call it angry fat. Let's see. So I have cold hands and feet for years. This is Lynn's question. A nurse said I should get my thyroid checked. I did. It always comes back low normal. Yeah, I mean, the suggestions I would say, Lynn, is if your diet's not squared away, the very first thing, I mean, I've just seen this. I've seen going gluten-free counter thyroid problems in so many people over the last 20 plus years. So that would be certainly something I would encourage you to look at, because it doesn't cost you anything, and it's free. I would check out No Grain, No Pain. Go read my book. Follow the 30-day diet in the book. And if that's free, even if you check it out at the library. You can also get it off of Barnes & Noble or Amazon or any other major book retailer. But that's where I would start. Let's see here. Can 100 billion CFU jumpstart your gut? 100 billion colony-forming units of probiotics, not a bad start. If you really want to jumpstart, like if you're really low, I mean, I look at kind of a starting dose at 200 billion CFUs. We have something, Cheryl, called ultrabiotic defense, which is guaranteed to contain more than 200 billion units on its expiration date. So when it rolls off the manufacturing line, we have it positioned to be about 400 billion, because as it sits on a shelf, that over time the potency starts to diminish. Most probiotics they're not labeled that way. We have full disclosure labels, so we guarantee the dose of our probiotics based on the expiration date, not based on the born-on date. Whereas most manufacturers will tell you how much you're getting is based on their born-on date, and that's very misleading. You always want to, because you could have 100 billion colony-forming units that you think you're getting, but it's been sitting on a shelf for 6 months and it's deteriorated 50%, so you're actually only getting 50 billion. So I hope that helps you at least a little bit understand that better. Yeah, so Mary says, I found that most doctors test around what your insurance allows. Call the insurance company and tell them why you need the test done. It can help, or pay cash to save your life. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, most doctors, they order what the insurance company covers, and they'll order more if your insurance company approves more. But I think that's unethical, and I'll tell you why. It's not the doctor's decision to help you manage your budget. It's the doctor's decision to tell you what you need in order to get valid information so you can make intelligent decisions about restoring your health. And to me, it's vastly less expensive to have the data up front and be able to make those meaningful changes than to spend 25 years on a thyroid medication struggling with your health, not knowing what's wrong with yourself because the doctor said your insurance wouldn't cover a test. That's a ridiculous notion. This is your life. This is your health. And so it matters. And doctors shouldn't make that decision, at least not in my opinion, not based on what they think you may or may not be willing to afford or are capable of affording. Let's see here. Keep going down on the right. Keep going down on the left. Melissa says, you said Levo has gluten and dairy. Is there a type of medicine for thyroid that you recommend someone try that does not have gluten, grains, and dairy? Yeah, I mean, there's several. Tirosint is a version of thyroid medicine that if it matches what your needs are, that could be used or recommended by your doctor. But then there's also, you can get levo, you just have to get it compounded. So if you do, some people do really better with levo than they do with, say, armour or Thyroid or Tirosint, which are kind of more of your natural versions of thyroid medication. And so they just need to get it compounded to make sure that there's no dairy and no corn derivative in it. So that's what I would suggest, is if you do really well on that, then you definitely want to get the junk out of it. And just ask your doctor to write you a prescription for a compounded version of the same medication. And that, most doctors, it's all they have to do is pull out their pad and write it. Now, on that same note, I'll also mention something else that I think is very critical to say. If you are on a medicine, thyroid, and you really need it, and you've experimented, and you've done all the things we talked about tonight, and you still need that thyroid medicine, and you're still struggling, you should be aware of the difference between generic and brand name medicines. Most generics they're made here, China and India. Now, there was a really huge expose. It happened right before the start of COVID. There's a really good book, a really great investigative journalist wrote a book on this topic called Bottle of Lies. And if you read it, you'll never, ever, ever accept generic drugs again. And it's because the FDA turns their eye to manufacturing, major flaws in manufacturing, major violations of manufacturing rules of pharmaceutical drugs occur in a lot of these. So when the FDA inspectors go over to these international factories, they come back with these scathing reports of how the facility wasn't clean, how certain areas weren't quarantined properly, how drugs, when they came into the facility, weren't properly handled, and there's all this risk for potential for contamination of the medicines. This is what generic is made from. So if you remember, there's a number of years ago when the politicians were saying we need cheaper drug options for elderly for Medicare. And so they passed this law, this Affordable Drug Act. And so what they really did, what they didn't tell you, is they didn't tell you they were going to get your generic drugs from companies who do a really crappy job and an unethical job of producing products. And they were going to call that the same as the brand name. And brand name is better. As a matter of fact, one of the things that when you read this book is certain clinics, certain famous clinics won't use generic, because one example I can give you is they were using generic drugs to lower their patient's blood pressure, and all of a sudden the drugs quit working and the blood pressure levels started going up, and these doctors really paying attention found out about this, and so they switched only to this because they couldn't trust that. And that's the problem we're in, is there's this huge ethical, so we have this ethics issue, right? And this is across the board. We have this major ethics issue in outsourcing our products, to these companies who aren't regulated effectively. You have to understand the FDA can only regulate if it's present strong enough and consistently enough to have oversight. But FDA truly doesn't have much oversight because there's too much money involved. And so once the money and the politics gets involved, the consumer is the one who gets screwed. Excuse my French, but that's what happens. You guys are the ones that take the brunt of the problem here. And so my advice is always go with brand name, or go with a compounding pharmacy where they're getting the brand name version to compound it for you, but not taking the generic, because the generic, in my opinion, with generics, and I've seen this be the case too in my own practice, generics, all bets are off. You don't know what you're going to get. You can't even trust that what you think you're getting is what you're getting. And that's one of the problems that so many people are having in these last number of years, is as more and more generics are hitting the market and not being properly regulated. Let's see here. If iodine in testing isn't showing, removing bromine and fluoride, what else can you take to get those out of the thyroid? You flush it out with iodine. The best way to detoxify from bromine and fluoride is to flush it out with iodine. That's why a lot of people fear iodine that have Hashimoto's, is when they take iodine, they feel worse, but the actual side effect they're experiencing, you know, if they have high levels of bromine or fluoride, is they're experiencing kind of a detoxification reaction where they're pushing that stuff out of their body, and so they're having that symptom. Epstein Barr, Kathy asking about Epstein Barr virus affecting thyroid function. Look, my experience is that most people overrate what Epstein Barr does. Epstein Barr, I mean, if I tested everybody in this country for Epstein Barr, we're going to find that more than 70% of the population have antibodies to Epstein Barr. It's not to say that Epstein Barr can't play a role. It's just saying that most doctors, you know, I think they put Epstein Barr on a pedestal. In most cases that I see, Epstein Barr is not playing the major role in why the thyroid is malfunctioning. And so if you've been told you have, you know, Epstein Barr, cytomegalovirus, you know, any of those types of viruses that are super common that you've been exposed to since you were a child, and that's probably really not the case. You probably are either doing your diet wrong or you haven't been thoroughly investigated in terms of the biochemistry. Let's see here. So low TSH, low T3, low T4, high cortisol on 125 micrograms of levothyroxine and 5 micrograms of cytomel. What would I suggest? I would suggest finding a doctor who's capable of doing everything we talked about tonight, because if you're on that quantity of medicine and you're still not responding, then, you know, that's the problem. You're being over medicated, but the medicine's not converting and not working, and you have no idea why. And whoever's giving you that medication also has no idea why, because it's obviously not solving the problem. No amount of medication increase is going to solve your thyroid problem from an underlying origin issue. You always want to go and look at the root. And so the things I talked about tonight were most of those roots. And if you start digging there first, most of you will get to an answer. If you're on a budget, how can you get tested? Is there a priority for testing? Yeah, Colleen, I would say if you're on a budget, you know, I can respect that, especially in these times. If you're on a budget for it is what I would suggest that you do. Don't piecemeal it. If I gave you, and I said only do these things here, let's prioritize these things here, but you had a food allergy that was damaging your gut, that was creating nutritional deficiencies, or you had nutritional deficiencies that were damaging your thyroid's ability to produce the chemicals that it's supposed to produce, like, you would be chasing your tail for the rest of your life. Like, don't piecemeal. You can't piecemeal comprehensive, right? I mean, like, fundamental things are fundamental for a reason, and these things that I shared with you tonight are fundamental. It would be like saying, hey, I'm going to eat right and I'm going to exercise, but I'm not going to sleep, and I expect to be healthy. No, you can't. You can't negotiate with sleep. It's a fundamental part of being healthy. And so these are fundamental parts of understanding. If you're healthy, you don't need to go spend all this money on this type of testing. But if you're not healthy and you're struggling, budget for it. Like, find you a good doctor, find out what it's going to cost you, budget for it, and when you do it right. And this is a problem I see all the time. People come to me with piecemealed labs all the time. They want me to interpret labs from last year and the year before and this year, and most of the time those labs are very non-comprehensive. There are bits and pieces of the complete puzzle. So this is why that person's still struggling, is because their other doctor has piecemealed their care and not been comprehensive in what they're trying to seek out. Yeah, so what do you suggest if your thyroid medicine continues to be changed due to recalls on potency issues? Yeah, I know what you're talking about, all the recalls with the drugs. Get with a good compounding pharmacy and do your best to stay as consistent as you can, but work with your doctor in a compounding pharmacy to try to make sure that you don't fall prey to some of these recalls that are occurring. I mean, there's not a perfect answer for that. Let's see here. Do the parathyroid glands have parathyroid glands have in the thyroid metabolism? No, parathyroid glands are predominantly are not your thyroid. They're parathyroid, meaning they're beside your thyroid, and their job, for the most part, is to help regulate your serum calcium and your bone density, which calcium and vitamin D play. Well, it's too much of a topic to get into tonight. Parathyroid is too complex to talk about in 10 seconds. Yeah, somebody said, my doctor said he won't work with a compounding pharmacy because of its inconsistencies from batch to batch. I would say that you probably need to connect your doctor with a compounding pharmacy, with a really good compounding pharmacist who can have an intelligent conversation with that doctor and get him to change his mind. Otherwise, I'd find a different doctor. Compounding pharmacies exist for a reason, because there's needs for specialized medicine. There's needs for specialized and customization within medicine. For your doctor to just dismiss all compounding pharmacies, in my opinion, is kind of irresponsible. And that would be like saying, hey, I had a bad experience with a plumber a few times, I'm going to dismiss plumbing as a career field, and my toilet could be backed up with waste dripping into my bedroom, but nope, I'm not going to bring in a plumber who might possibly know how to do something right. It doesn't make any sense to dismiss an entire career. It's be like saying, hey, I had a bad experience with a doctor once, I'm never going to go to a doctor again. It's a ridiculous notion. Get a different doctor, or have a conversation with your doctor, talk some sense into that doctor. Let's see, keep going down on both sides. So, more questions about compounding pharmacies. Look, there's good and bad in any profession. You can have a bad experience with a compounding pharmacy, and you can have a great experience with one. I would say if you found that you struggle with one, call around, find out who's good. Talk to your friends, family, other people that you might know that have experience with a compounder, and find a company that you feel like you can trust, and give them a shot. Yeah, so somebody's asking about, do I do virtual consultation? Yeah, we do virtual consultation. You can call us if you'd like to do that. You don't have to fly to Texas. If you don't live in Texas, you can call me. So if somebody's asking about the ideal TSH level, there's no ideal. It's a myth. What does that mean, ideal? There's a range. 0.5 to 4.5 is generally the range. Why is there a range? Because some people weigh 100 pounds and some people weigh 250 pounds. So the ideal level, when doctors try to tell you, oh, your level should be this or should be that, it's really kind of misleading. It's not about ideal. It's about being within that norm with all of these things. So again, when you're looking at all of these things in comprehension, you don't have to shoot for, some doctors say a functional range is under 2, right? And I disagree with that. I say if you're a female that weighs 100 pounds, you're not going to produce as much TSH most likely as a man that weighs 190 pounds or 200 pounds, right? There are differences. There are biochemical individual differences. And so we don't really say, okay, what's ideal? That's what that range is designed to help us understand, is where can we go with this, and how do you feel, and are you responding? Let's keep going down on the left. If diagnosed with hyperthyroidism and you don't take meds, you can you find out the cause eventually? Yeah, the meds for hyperthyroidism, that's a decision you have to make with your doctor, whether or not you want to take those meds. But I've had a number of people with Graves not take the meds and still find the cause. In many cases, the cause was gluten. Gluten and food allergies are common. I see commonly a cause of Graves as my overall experience. So I've seen a number of people with that condition, when they changed their diet, they didn't need the medicine. Is there a certain food allergy type of? So Deborah's asking about food allergy tests. So the mistake I see most people make is more than one test, Deborah. So it's not like, okay, do this test. But most people do this test. It's called an IgG test, and it's inaccurate, and I don't recommend it. If you're doing IgG testing, or if your doctor's wanting to run IgG testing for food allergies, You have to understand it's not that simple. IgG can be, you could have IgG antibodies that are helping you, not necessarily hurting you, so it can be misinterpreted. You can also have IgG antibodies that mean there is a true allergy. Most labs don't differentiate between friendly IgG and damaging or hurtful IgG, and that's a big part of the problem with why when many people go buy these food allergy tests online, they get information that's not really all that helpful. But there's IgA, there's IgG, there's IgM, there's IgE, there's immune complex, there's T cell responses. There's different kinds of immune responses, and this is what I mean. It has to be comprehensive in nature, and that's why it's so important that, what I'm giving you guys is a synopsis. Like I've given you the outline to go and talk with your doctor about, but look, you don't want an unqualified doctor running tests that they don't know how to interpret and read, and that's a big part of the problem for many people, is they ask their doctor to do things their doctor's not trained on and not capable of, right? You don't go to the OB-GYN and ask them to do your endoscopy, and you don't go to your GI doctor and ask them to do a vaginal exam. Like it's not the right match. If you want nutritional evaluation, you need to see somebody who's an expert in nutritional biochemistry. And if that's not what that doctor is, then you're barking up the wrong tree. You're asking a plumber to be an auto mechanic, etc. Right? You get the gist. So again, hire the right person, find the right expert. Okay, I think we got to wrap it up because we still got, pages of questions left, but we're already 27 minutes past the hour. So I'm hungry. I'm going to go home and eat dinner. And I hope you do the same thing, and I hope you have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Look, if you're new to the show and you want to get reminders about the show, make sure you come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. Sign up for our newsletter there. It's right there, right up front and center, very obvious, and you'll get those email reminders. This will also ensure that you don't get censored, as we've been targets of major censorship over this last year, because we talk about truth, we talk about real health, and that always makes us a target. So help me help you. Subscribe so we can communicate, but also share this information, right? Share. Our goal is to save 100 million lives. Just in the US alone, there's 46 million people with autoimmune disease. And our goal is to save 100 million lives. And we know with your help that we'll be able to accomplish that goal. So help me help you by sharing and caring about other people as well. And together we can do wonders. Have a great evening. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of PDOB. Take care. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.